Hi, I'm Christine Stewart. I write as Christine Stewart Nunez, and I think I'm the founder of the Women Poets Collective. It was a brainchild in 2014 when I had a manuscript of poetry that I needed some feedback on, but it was a bit too late in the year to go to a major conference like most writers do, and I was also very pregnant. So I asked several women that I knew who had really good reputations as writers and responders to work, and asked them if they wanted to get together for a weekend and share manuscripts. And that's how this was born. We've been every year since 2015, then was our first year together. We have met for a weekend and had fun and gotten to know each other better and responded to each other's manuscripts and performed our work as public reading. Except for this year, the pandemic has really changed the way we operate. And instead of taking a year off, what we've done is met with Zoom during the months of May, April and May, I think, and spent an hour on each other's work. And then this is our public reading. So we thought we'd share it with the public. And so welcome to the Women Poets Collective. We are all poets living in South Dakota, all of us right now in this particular version in 2020 right now. And we will just read a few of our poems alphabetically and then wrap it up. I think if you have any questions, you can feel free to email me, or Marcella has a great email website about us, that on her website, a link to us and about us. But I think for the future, one of our challenges is to figure out how we're going to expand this great system we've got here, because so many of us have had books published after we've workshopped and sustained each other and supported each other throughout the years. And so we'd like to teach other people or give other people this model. So stay tuned in the next few years after the pandemic goes away, or we all have vaccines, or whatever's going to happen, for how we can bring this to you, men and women included, who are focused on really good collaborative feminist principles of sharing the work and being honest and supportive of each other.
Well, I guess I'm the first reader by virtue of my name beginning with a B. I'm Elizabeth Benkert. I'm a second generation member of the collective, and thank you, Christine, for organizing everything, and thank you to the other poets for really giving outstanding support and feedback on my work. I feel like I'm a much better poet now than I was before I was invited to join them. It was difficult to decide what I wanted to read today, given all of the bad news that keeps piling on top of us this year. I decided to pull out 3 short poems. The first, I suppose, is a reminder that the more things change, the more, they don't. And the other 2 come around to a kind of pragmatic optimism. I really honestly believe that we can save the stuff that's really important to us. Though if we do, it's probably not going to happen with a bunch of kittens and rainbows. It's going to take some hard work. So first poem. The state dessert is kuchen. The first thing Wikipedia says about South Dakota is that it is named for the Dakota people. The last thing it says is that the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally brings hundreds of visitors to the Black Hills every year. In between, it tells us that the state nickname comes from the heads of 4 Europeans carved into sacred rocks, that it contains the geographic center of North America, that it was colonized by 4,420 miles of railroad tracks, and that the state bird is an invasive species from China. Elsewhere, we learn that pheasants were followed by the less welcome Dutch elm disease, emerald ash borer, zebra mussels, Asian carp, Catholic boarding schools, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I think about these things as I drive up I-29, about the geologic layers beneath my wheels, and the little towns huddled beneath the big sky, secure in their sense of permanence. I think about the vanishing point straight north of my dashboard, a geography of transience. All I wanted was a job, and now I navigate highways set at 90-degree angles. And constructed over a rolling landscape carved out by glaciers, shaped by the meandering migrations of bison and nomads. Sometimes I forget. Sometimes I settle myself inside four walls, domestic and safe. And sometimes the prairie breaks open my skull, swallowing me whole in the cry of a blackbird. Dormancy. At Easter, when I was 3, I was my mother's crocus in the snow, a yellow dress, plump cheeks peeking beneath a white bonnet, feet squashed into patent leather shoes. I have a picture. I smile in the slushy snow, sure that I am a good girl, that I will get kisses, that my mother will hold my hand when we go to Sunday school. Here, the snowshine is so bright it erases shadows, divides the world into sharp white and blinding blue. The temperature dips so low, snow squeals beneath my boots, the wind steals my breath, and crocuses will not grow. So I plant daylilies in my garden. Soft oranges, bright yellows, deep reds. Squirrels will not eat them. The cold doesn't reach them. Spring cannot drown them. They resurrect themselves. This one is a letter written to Persephone, the goddess of the underworld and springtime. Dear Persephone, you love pomegranates. Such a baffling fruit, a fistful of garnets and memories of sunshine. I prefer pedestrian indulgences. Chambersburg peaches, slurpy, sweet, soft, dripping down my chin, my arm, my shirt, an excess of, is that too easy? Should pleasure come in little bits after a great deal of work? Be exotic and mysterious? Be worthy of dreams, mythological, savoring of springtime and death? Perhaps. It's true, my peaches are long ago sliced, frozen, sealed in jars, savored, and gone. Now I eat apples and drink strong, dark coffee. It seems more important to just pay attention, not feel the long, slow slide of warm syrup on my chin. Perhaps. But if you can explain these things to me sometime, I promise to pay attention.
I think I'm next. So thanks, Elizabeth. That was great. And thanks to Christine for including me in WPC since the beginning. I appreciate it. I'm Barbara Duffy. I'm from Mitchell. I teach at Dakota Wesleyan University. I'm going to read 2 poems. The first is called Office of Disease Prevention, which is a real thing here in South Dakota. And I've been thinking about these folks a lot recently. Office of Disease Prevention. I had a supple virtue and an ill egg industry, but still I had a child, his glossy face as live as fire back before the rodlets of the bactery cross-handled him and shook him white as birds, the ones that gave him that bacterium. Their underbellies blue when air crowns black at dusk. My heart was cold as a stone church when the disease surveillance officer spoke softly in my voicemail, asked me what drug regimen we'd put the child on, what zoos or farms or restaurants he'd worked his unwashed hands across. When I take mine, he said, I tell them, you wash your hands. Wash your hands right now. Don't touch that. Do not touch a thing. I let my son touch things. I let him run his grime beneath the nails hands along the horse's neck, across the dog's soft paws, their pads encrusted with her own excretions. Let him turn himself over in mud. It sets the earth to roil and roll, this tyranny of the microbial, ubiquitous as rats or sepulchres and equally ambivalent. He's on a soap and water sequestration, where his health is peaceful as the dawn and just as fragile, purpling into fall mornings. And the next one is called The Rewilder. The Rewilder. The streets cut so narrow I can hear neighbors have sex, then, after a pause, pour cereal into bowls. Outside town, at the bend in the road, a wild fig grows over a fence, stone whitewashed, that keeps it from a farmer's planned fig grove. Fruits bulb out, fertility icons, at their gecko green purpling bottoms. Broad, fat leaves spread out over the summer air. This was what Saint Theoctiste ate when she escaped the pirates, lived alone on this island for 35 years in the church by the waterfront. But someone had been here before, left their fig cultivars in the empire of Constantine. Wind turbines, straight as school marms, dancing only with their arms. The old windmills, bladeless now, soft rolled shoulder, the one that was once, millennia ago, marble. Entropy pulverizes everything in just this way, disperses it. Snails in over-upholstered white shells clump on cacti, like some fungal growth or floral expression of lost spring. Cats sleep in oleander shade. 3 to 6% of wolves harbor dog DNA, an admixture, mainly in Eastern Russia. I would worry about the wilderness, but who can tell? A husband, statistically speaking, is most likely how I would die. They kill more people than terrorists. Still, it took me 3 years post-threat to leave. So thanks for having me, and next is Jean Emmons.
Hello, my name is Jean Emmons, and I want to thank the Women Poets Collective. They've been a great stimulus for me and my poetry. This year I've been working on a collection of poems about my mother, who was a Latin teacher. The collection is called Dead Language. In these poems, I journey through the underworld in search of my mother. So I'll read 2 poems from the section of the book called Dark Wood. You might recognize that phrase from Dante. The first poem is called Understory. Understory. It was always you who read me the story. You spun my straw into gold. You were the fairy queen, the good godmother. You knitted me the shirts of nettles to make me human again, left me the one wing. You had the wand, the crown, the dress. You carved me out of wood, made me a real girl. All this time I've haunted your underworld, wanting you to come to me, face me, outlive me, look me in the eye, know me, forgive me. But now I know it is my turn to write you backwards, I am neither a mirror nor a lamp. I have to build you like a house to shelter me, build you like a fire to warm me, even as you die. Compose you as you decompose, compose myself, bring our duet back into harmony after the long caesura, the whole rest, the bird's eye of the fermata watching, the empty measures of your death, your fugue of silence. Oh, mother, how I have wished you to ghost me. Today I dissemble you, gather the rusty spare parts of all that I've missed of you, and reinvent you, reassemble you, or someone resembling you, weld you together, draw you into my disheartened arms, kiss you. And this one is called Under the Illusion. It is warm and dark in this wood of lost tears. The leaf rot smell rises and sifts down soft to the roots of infant trees. The smooth heads of acorns shed their coarse caps, those top knots and rims of curls that dignify them among the homely brown things of the earth. They crack and white sprouts squirm out, stretch up, grow wings. I am finding my way in this wood of no stars, following the true north of you home. I was under the illusion death would leave no footprint, then stomped and flattened under that impression. I sniffed dread lurking beneath the bed of my grief. Now I smell the sweetness of earth's common compost and feel her arms open to embrace me. I swear I can hear the little horns of fern unwinding out of the dark, the green buds boiling up on the bare limbs. I know that one day in this wood of no fears, I will be home, but not today. It is time to close my eyes, stretch out my arms, and ride the updraft of April back to the cool sheets of what is left of my life. Thank you. And next is Lindy Obach.
Thank you, Jean. Hi, my name is Lindy Obach, and I am a teacher and writer in Sioux Falls. I want to thank you for joining us, and thank you to the WPC and Christine. I sure love you ladies, so thank you for all your help. I got 3 poems for you today from my new manuscript titled This Way, This Way, which is a manuscript about home and the prairie and birds and love. So here is the first poem, Stove Light. The glow of the light above the stove, warm and golden. So many grandmas and great aunts have kept this light switched on so little bodies could find the small bathroom or fill a juice glass with water from the sink in the darkest part of the night. I boil water for tea each evening before bed underneath that warmth. The rest of the house dark and cool, my wife and dog tucked in and asleep upstairs. My hands cup the steam from the kettle. I breathe it in. Outside, faint honks from the strings of snow geese flying south, their bellies glowing moon white as they pass over the maples of the city. Across the street, a late night walk spies a shimmer of yellow in the space between the living room curtains, and a woman, tired and happy, thinking of grandmothers and great aunts, of winged things up above, pouring a sluice of hot water to steep, then to sleep. And my next poem is called Quieting the Honking. My father tells this story. One late July afternoon in the 1970s, His mother's geese were dipping their necks into the creek, and thunderheads rolled in. The sky suddenly close, very dark. In the swirling gray and the flashing lightning, only some of the geese made it back home. Months later, my father was tilling land out in the south corner. There, bedded down in the switchgrass, were the lost geese. With the bucket of his tractor at low mast and the engine idling barely at first gear, my father herded the lost geese onto the narrow scoria road and back to the farm. Home closed in. The lost geese's honking grew louder. When the geese in the yard heard this, they came running. The two groups of geese met, the ones who never left home and the ones who were gone for so long, and they quieted their honking and linked necks. They stayed that way for hours, their necks threaded together, their breastbones touching, their hearts beating against one another. I tell this story. I have been lost before. I have been so far from home, I couldn't tell you which way was east or south. Nothing looked familiar. I have been bedded down in tall, strange grass, long neck flat against the earth, scared and silent. I have been away. And my last poem is titled This Way, This Way. Doesn't it seem impossible that I found you here in all this space and grass and air, where most days I cannot tell prairie from sky, where most days I am looking for ospreys above the Missouri instead of the other half of my heart? Maybe I tunneled through pine shelter belts, emerging scratched and squinting at the midday sun, thinking I glimpsed you up ahead at the section line a mile west. Maybe you knew I would catch up eventually. I have looked in the windows of every abandoned farmhouse, along every rocked edge of stock pond and wildlife refuge, thinking I saw a patch of your flannel caught in the wind in a cottonwood saying this way, this way. And then you, watching pelicans float down from the sky. I am out of breath. I am just about running out of South Dakota. But oh, did I find you? And oh, my breath has not yet caught. Thank you. And next up, my friend Penn Pearson.
Thanks, Lindy. My name is Penn Pearson, and I've lived in South Dakota my entire adult life, moving from Sioux City, Iowa to Sioux Falls when I was 23. I currently live in Aberdeen, and it's an honor to be part of WPC. The poems I'll be reading, I wrote after my father's death. You've exhaled your last breath, yet you're still telling me how to navigate I-29, sitting kitty corner from me at the dining room table, a map laid out between us so I might find my way home. Or we're in church side by side, singing Great Is Your Faithfulness, our voices blending together, yours ringing out, mine half as bold, but just as true. And you're screaming at my stupidity, my total lack of common sense and logic when I get stuck driving up a hill on ice instead of taking another flatter route. Then you're guiding me down the aisle, having asked if I prefer you bearded or clean shaven, but you're taking up the center, so I'm almost in the pews. Or we're sitting across from each other at the kitchen table, our familiar places, eating oyster stew on winter solstice, and you're gazing at me like I'm a mirror before you tell your reflection the cancer is terminal, and I match your expression. It's submission, fear, and confusion. Then I'm pouring out the last oyster crackers when I see the black specks in my bowl aren't grains of pepper, but flour weevils, and my face flushes in embarrassment, the worst feeling except the sorrow. Dispossession. The set is a stadium in whose parking lot fears of losing one's car are well-founded. and more personal effects that I carry or wear, such as the ring on my left-hand ring finger, my wallet, all my money, or even the orthotics in my shoes, threaten to dispossess me as I walk around and around, wondering where I parked my car, which isn't really my car. Because this is only a dream about loss, not the reality that dreams refract, I find myself on the lost and found floor within the stadium's dimly lit bowels and witness belt upon belt conveying strangers' possessions, pawed by other strangers who, in vain pursuit of recovering what they've lost among the disarray of things, reconcile themselves to what can be found, as if secondhand shoes, used household goods, or a lot of dirty white handkerchiefs could return all mourners to their right minds, if not quash our world's collective grief. A stranger myself, I mined the quarry for the sterling silver ring I mislaid on a public restroom sink years ago, forgetting my car and neglecting the purse on my shoulder, its contents ripening as if fruit strangers might pluck, or falling onto the conveyor belt unbeknownst to me, when I also lose the loose ring on my left hand, even while I search for the ring I lost years before. At last, I substitute another ring I find for the rings I've lost, as if the luggage of a traveler whose destination I assume as my own itinerary because imagination deserts me. But the ring doesn't look or feel right, so I wear it the same way a widow wears her husband's wedding band on a chain around her neck to remind herself of the wife she once was. That other woman whose family resemblance no mirror persuades her is more than a coincidence. Interstate. I'm driving down I-29 after sunset when an owl appears in the median, its body ringed by twilight's halo. The bird swoops toward me, brakes before the windshield, and arcs away, like an airplane lifting off tarmac into the gray skyline, then banking against a headwind to change course. I cruise faster than the speed limit, the owl's spectral presence hovering in my rearview mirror's blind spot. So long I begin to wonder if it isn't my father, trying to make his peace with this world, our night, or me, though he's been gone over a year. But what exactly was he trying to say as the owl flew up and out of sight? Where a rearview mirror just might, but doesn't reveal much of anything, only the longing of who's ever watching its reflection, just hoping for a sign. Thank you. Next up, Marcella Raymond.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for watching our video. Thank you especially to Christine for starting the WPC, and to all of the women in the WPC who have been so essential in me getting my poetry written and out there. So I'm going to read 3 poems from the manuscript that I've been workshopping with the WPC for the last couple of years, and it's a manuscript about the Magdalen Laundries of Ireland, which forced women and girls into unpaid labor and essentially kept them incarcerated against their will throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. So these are 3 poems that resulted from my trip to Ireland last summer to investigate the laundries. The first poem has an expression in it, "not trace," which in the language of the Magdalen Laundries is how women's names were recorded in death registries without providing any information about where they died or where they were buried. So you'll hear that. Garden of Sin, and this begins with a quote from the Bible. "My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. And that's from Psalm 120 or 139, verse 15. In the ungarden at Tuam, we are harvesting babies, nearly 800 in all. How many bushels worth? Pale blue as butterwort, tiny rib bones and undulating trellis. The babies have taken root in buried septic chambers, their mothers long since plucked and bitten. Baby legs, some only twigs, some still fat-fruited, lie akimbo in early spring loam. At High Park, old gardens still produce. Here in the Irish fog, our plot of young women push fragrant buds through the green, where St. Fiacre left cuttings staked to chain-link cribs with laundry twine. These flowering vines, called knot trace in the sisters' tongue of plotting and cataloging, grow wild. Their tendrils run everywhere, cling to us all. We have left our gardens too long untended. Spring rain soaks the dirt, plants push to the surface. We must hurry, dig up and burn these weeds before they fruit and go to seed. Small talk in the taxi. The driver asks, though he's a Galway gent, being polite, "Here on holiday?" I'm tired today, tired of being away from home, being polite, avoiding the subject, tired of shallow, happy tourist banter. So I tell him, I'm traveling Ireland, searching out the Magdalen laundries for a book I want to write. Oh, sure, those were terrible times, he says, then silence. But we both hear it, the first slow crack as the dam unseals itself. I could write a book, he says, but where would I start? Long pause. We listen together as water finds its way, opens wider the wound, lets in the sea. The things those priests did to me, he says. I keep still, let the waves come, roil and crash. They ruined me for life, those brutes, he says. His voice is shaking now, the pitch higher, thinner. I'm afraid we'll both drown. I will write poems, I say, trying to calm the tide. Oh yeah, he says, I love poetry too. Quote, and I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, end quote. He recites. I tell him he's so lucky to be from the land of Yeats. Yeah, maybe I'll write about those days when I retire, he says. We stop at the square. I pay him 20 euros for an €8 fare. Thank you, I say, which seems too polite, too small. Please don't wait, I say. Write your book. And this is called The Great Escape. And it's from 1968 when a group of girls at the Sisters of Mercy Laundry in Galway escaped. The Great Escape. In 68, the day the workmen left their ladder against the second story of the Mercy Laundry and went off for stew and a pint, already having taken out a window to scrape and glaze, we watched from our bake shop as 30 girls came down the ladder. Fast and quiet they came, one right after another, aprons and shifts billowing like sheets on a line. No hesitation as each touched ground, they scampered off like mice. Some ran up Forster Street, some across to the green, some south to the docks, some straight into Galway's humming heart. Some girls beat on strangers' doors, and many were let in. Women home with a house full of wee ones, tired of swallowing secrets, gave food, clothes, fare to Dublin or England. Some girls stayed in Galway, went to scrubbing floors or tending babies in Taylor's Hill, where a few people could still afford to keep a servant or two. One crazy girl ran across the street, went right to work for the Dominicans. One hell to the next, ma'am said. The Gardaí came blowing whistles, snagged 2 or 3, dragged them kicking and cussing back to sisters waiting in the yard, their sticks clenched tight, hidden under habits. Keep going. Don't stop, we all whispered. From shop doors, bicycles, kitchen windows, schoolyards, quickly crossing ourselves. Even today, no one remembers who those workmen were or why, in the name of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, they left their ladder up against that black hole, that one missing window. Thank you. And next up is Erica Saunders.
Hi, my name is Erica Saunders. I live in Brookings, South Dakota. I've been here now for 8 years and relatively new to the collective. It's been this my 2nd year and terribly grateful for all of you, and what a community to belong to. I appreciate it. And getting into the rhythm of the cycle of review that we go through as a collective, these 3 poems are newer. You read a poem this year called Hit or Miss Yields, and so I've been playing with that idea of yields and harvests and things of that nature. So possibly you'll see these poems next year. And Marcella, when I was reading through them to prepare, I already have one edit I know you'll be interested in me doing. So here we go. There's 3 of them. The first one is called Stopping by the Fish Hatchery. A sunset of lavender laces the water's surface where rainbow trout rise. With a little hand in mine, we spot writhing bodies, Xerox copies lapping the concrete stream. Chain link and bird netting overhead completes the scene with gray. We watch as they feed from a golf cart, the hard pellets rain. The trout cluster at human shadows, awaiting the grain like cattle at the gate. For quarters, you can turn the dispenser knob and have a handful of pellets to feed them yourself. My daughter dumps her handful into the water. Lightning surface quick, the trout compete to eat. Eyes stinging from the sameness of their slick speckled bodies, like too many words blurring a page. I make out a trout that stands out waving back and forth in slow, deliberate, rhythmic body bends, who appears to be both coming and going. It must be a trick of shadow and light. Only after I point it out to the children do I see that a larger trout has swallowed its nursery mate whole, and we blink. Okay, the next one is called Harvest. Tomatoes branch and vine, bolstered by twine. Mid-August droops the heavy fruits, and my grandmother's tumor-ribboned abdomen sagging in an earthward arc. By the bushel, we stoop and gather. In the kitchen sink, the tomatoes float as grubs bail out like flicking tongues. The smell of hot summer ripeness radiates into our steaming faces. We wash, blanch, and peel, skins like paraffin, these ruddy offspring. Cram them into sterile jars, battered and rammed, smashed by the wooden spoons until bleeding, they line the basement walls, waiting on the lean winter. And the final one is called Gargoyles. A cement cathedral in a cityscape of bones and bridge trusses. The choir's blue robes of echoing bells sing. On stage with a hot mic ahead of the sacrifice of the sacrament of the sacred event, the priest turns in a conversational tone, host to ghost to the sacrificial daughter. Nature died generations ago. All that's left is a hollow embrace. Twilight mists roll in on crow wings, obscuring still glass grace. Men outside the mission doors ring and wait. On the stoop, they joke and shove each other about, while a lucky few, with mouths full of voodoo dolls, shoot up in the bathroom stalls before rolling into sleeping bags on stone. So thank you. Next up is the lovely Christine Stewart.
Thanks. You know, it's always interesting to figure out what you're going to read in moments like this, and like in a reading, like it's in person, and then this is a different thing, and I usually overthink it like way too much. But one of the things I've learned from the pandemic is you just don't overthink anything. I just kind of do. And so the first poem, I felt like, oh, maybe I'll read that poem. I just stuck with that poem. And so it's a bit of a long one. It's called Credo. And I went outside my comfort zone with this poem a bit, and I used fractals as the subject matter, but also as the way to organize structurally the poem. So if you look at it, it looks different on the page than my usual poems might. And I say outside my comfort zone because I don't really understand math. But to find the fractal integer, one of the things, or the fractal shape, one of the things I tried to do is I tried to find like actual shapes of tile fractals, and then tried to make my poem look like that on the page, and that didn't work. So then I was exploring other ways to find the shape of this poem. And so then I came up with, there's this, they're fractal integers, and then I just borrowed a set of fractal integers off the internet. And then I used them as the syllables for each line. So that's the shape of the poem, or that's the structure of the poem. So it does have a epigraph defining the use of the way I'm using fractal. Fractal, a cascade of never-ending, self-similar, repeated elements that change in scale but retain similar shape. Credo. A cascade of infinite is why I believe in loops and spirals, subtle shifts, cycles. My son, preschooler stunned by the Science Museum, sticks his hand into a glacier, the chunk of broken testimony, the history of a world dissolving. Cold, it's cold, he said, and it's melting. Look right here. Similarities of self astonish. I see them in architecture, geometry, a welcome language, shapes a new alphabet for prayer and song. I study Peter Eisman's House 11A, lapping up patterns, interlocking L's, squares, and replicated rectangles, the syntax of ideas. For Frank Gehry's Guggenheim in Bilbao, syntax looks like titanium scales rhyming across curves. Glass and limestone patterns, similarity of visual texture, a creation of weight, depth. Order breaks tension where the lines turn. A cascade of repeating elements grounds my belief in humanity as mystery. Signs appear, a sound, song, or syllable mean things. Armadillo, armadillo. In the bath, my youngest son uses his Louis Armstrong voice. Grit gives way to twang, and twang turns into hard rock screams. He's an oracle at 4 years old, an armor-clad mammal, his muse. My oldest son speaks in code, echolalia, a symptom of a seizure-besieged brain. When he utters no, and no, and no, and no, then I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. I listen for a divine voice revealed. Cascades changing in scale, not shape, is why I trust weight, depth, height, materials, and thingness. Saturn's rings, the Pacific coastline, bolts of lightning, a Romanesco cauliflower, angelica flowerhead, veins of sycamore leaves, seashells, snowflakes, blood vessels, DNA. This range and scope of fractals inspire awe. a cascade of never-ending wonder at both connections and aberrations, as well as places of perfect order and broken patterns. When I consider what we may be reduced size copies of, I grapple with insight. It hovers in physics and biology, the shapes of letters, the magic of new languages, the mystery of cells and synapses, the music of my son's voices, the geometries of buildings and trees. Sometimes I glimpse an answer, something like seeing starlight years after the star dies, supernovas. 4 hours before my youngest son's birth, I dreamed my sister, dead 31 years, placed him in my arms. Take care of him, she said. He has her eyes, ice blue and illumined by God. So that's the one. That was kind of long. So I think I'll end it there. But we're kind of Norma's having some technical difficulty. Did we figure out if she would be able to jump back on?
So we're working on that, but I'm not sure I can figure out a way to check the original meeting link for a password. She's being asked for a password without ending this meeting. So I'm still trying to figure it out. So Christine, you have to read.
Let me try something. Christine, you read a poem. Let me try something.
Okay, do you want me to make you host, Lindy?
I don't think I need that.
Okay.
Okay, all right. I'll read another one. And I will just open it to, When You're Away, I Think About Form. I'll read that one. So my new manuscript of poetry is about architecture, or at least uses architecture as inspiration for a lot of the forms and a lot of the ideas and metaphors. And I think that this poem was inspired when Erica and I were at AWP a few years ago, and I think this is when I started this poem. And it has an epigraph by John Haydock, who's an architect and also a poet. And he says, I don't make any separations. A poem is a poem, a building's a building. I mean, it's all structure. I'm just like, I love that, it's all structure. Yeah, it's all the same thing. So when you're away, I think about form. I need villanelles of you pulling my breath like lines moving down the page and a promise of rhyme bending my ear. I need a sestina of touch, patterns of palm, stroke, skim, brush, and rub returning, a cycle of sound and pressure I apprehend in my bones. I need the Triolace refrain rolling off your tongue like a sample, new and nuanced here and here and here. It's all structure, is why I need angles of play, the love our bodies build. I miss you. The ache's more sour than a dropped foot, a forced rhyme. If you're free from me too long, what will you jettison first? Meter, lines? Come home. Our sonnets, the 14 creases in the sheets, a couplet of light greens your eyes, only inches from mine when iams ascend atop iams. Please, I need you in haiku, distilled in syllables, laid bare in the last line's turn. So there's that one.
Marcella, you're on mute.
Sorry. So if anybody has another poem they want to read, we're kind of waiting to see if Norma will try to rejoin the meeting. Anybody bring an extra poem? No?
Well, one of the things that I know, like, what's the most asked if there was a real audience here, we'd say, "What does anyone have any questions?" And we're all experienced readers. So, what's one of the most popular questions we're asked at a reading? No.
What inspires you to write?
Well, Marcella.
Why do you write poetry and not something else? Anybody?
For me, I'll start since it was my idea. For me, the difference between a poem and something else like a short story or an essay is that I can distill it down to just a slice. And I have a lot of pieces that are companion pieces where there'd be an essay version of that poem, because a lot of my poems are inspired by things that happened to me. So I have companion pieces, and sometimes I'll say, oh wow, this really needs to be an essay because there's so much I want to say here. There's a lot of scenes I wish I could dive into, but the poem version is just like this distilled, and I keep going like this, like I can tease out a strand from it and it becomes the poem. So for me, that's why I write poetry. Also, I'm a big believer in the sound that poems can give us, whereas you can hear rhythm in prose as well, but it's usually a little more diluted because of the sentence structures of prose. So I like the music part of it. Maybe I'm just a frustrated musician or something.
Anybody else? Oh, no, I'm not muted.
Am I muted?
There
Am
you
I-
go. I can hear you.
Yeah, I agree with Christine, and I find that what inspires me, I'm often when I begin to write a poem, I'm chronicling or I'm observing and describing. But what really inspires me in the process of writing is the language itself and the music of the language, and trying to tease out beauty in the sounds of things, so as well as the imagery. So I feel inspiration comes in the act of writing more than anything. Although I will say I am very inspired by reading the work of other poets. So that's my answer to that question.
So do you think we should read poetry? Do you think people who want to write should read whatever kind of writing they want to do?
I believe they should. I believe it's very helpful to read. I don't believe that we really imitate or steal or borrow that much. I think as long as we are following the thread of our own thoughts, that we will be original. So yeah, we can use others as a jumping off point or as a means of inspiration, seeing the depth and the variety of how things can be approached.
Yeah, I sometimes see my students who haven't read a lot of contemporary poetry, their early work sounds very 18th century or 19th century, because that's what they're used to reading. And when they start reading contemporary poetry, it just changes everything. I mean, they're still writing about the same things they're interested in before, and they might even be writing about like mythological things or like narrative poems, or I'm thinking one of student in particular, but the way they put the words together just changed. And I think I see a lot of people who want to write who just haven't found the contemporary voices that they want to enter the conversation with.
Yeah. So why do you guys think workshopping this collective process, why do this? What's it good for?
Well, for me, I have absolutely no objectivity when I look at my own poetry. So I don't know what needs polished, whether it's whether it's saying what I want it to say, whether there are more effective ways to say what I want to say. And so workshopping the poems gives me a reality check, right? What's I might like a poem, but was it really just guts on paper? I need someone to tell me what's working and what's not working.
Right. Kate, Elizabeth, did you have another poem you wanted to read?
Yeah, when I was trying to figure out what I was going to read this afternoon, I pulled up one other poem that was kind of a history is cyclical kind of poem. Stylistically, it's very different from the others that I read, but I had a lot of fun writing it. Atomic Venus, talking about atomic testing in the Pacific Islands in the 40s and 50s. She was the first wife. She was a massive miscalculation. She was an error. She emerged out of the sea. Where else would such an origin story begin? She was engendered by the ejaculate of algorithms and Stepford wives, her perfect beauty for the good of mankind, to end all wars, to civilize the uncivil, to tame the communists. Brava, he cried. No way to resist that perfect centerfold, that high energy alpha particle with neutron tritium nucleus. Their destination wedding cleared the house, several houses, an entire string of islands, in fact. Their honeymoon climaxed with a cum shot 4 miles high and a half-life of 24,000 years, a blood-red flash whose smoky curves embraced a hemisphere. At the reception, she baptized the wedding guests with snow in summertime, radioactive manna for her chosen people who watched the festivities from a not-so-safe distance. Her husband declared the guests more like us than mice and kept a scrapbook to commemorate the thyroid cancer, the lizard skin, the abortion. She just got into their blood somehow. Once she'd burned her bridges, she gave birth to NASA because something good had to come out of this shit show, and then left some cows in Louisiana with spiked livers. He joined a 12-step program, got clean, mostly, signed a pledge, insisted we all clean our cupboards so he could stay sober. Too bad the wedding guests turned up at his support group, showed him the cleaning bill, whining about indefinite displacement. He said, I'll make it up to you. He said, $1.5 billion over 20 years, which makes cleaning, cheaper than building a wall, though they can still see the bulge under the concrete carpet. Now he's settled down with a nice girl from the old neighborhood. Stock options, steady, blonde and manicured. Her tanks discreetly parked in the Middle Eastern garage where they belong. Her children suckle at the intertubes, none the wiser, and breed in the warmth of lithium batteries reconceiving themselves. Atomic Venus hangs out on late-night cable, after Godzilla, before the duck and cover drills, where you have to go looking, because we don't talk about that anymore, because we've moved on, because we know every origin story starts the clock all over again.
Thanks, Elizabeth. We have Norma back, who had to go buy a new computer and download software. And so now she's back, and this is Norma Wilson.
Well, my apologies for the technical difficulties, everybody. And thank you so much, Lindy, for getting me started again. I appreciate it. I'd like to read 3 poems, and the one is from my anthology, Memory Echo Words, and the poem is This Caravan, This Jazz. Lift of heart, beat of drum and trumpet, Wynton Marsalis redefines this tune, playing the melody so easily, taking us on a caravan through desert and jungle of 20th century sound. That century we became American, not the world dominating monetary control by multinational corporations, kind of American, but the fierce and honey sound of trumpet and piano keys, the pulsing rhythm of African drums, the heartbeat of this land, sustaining us, this jazz, like the liquid lapping of ocean waves and the waves of brain that make it forever new. Marcus Roberts' piano makes us sway as this caravan moves what we need: food and medicine, spices, batik from the east. We catch the melody, the beat, in time to dance again. Always knew this music makes us feel light, too light not to lift the pen from the flowing page and catch the drift. We're all in this together, this caravan, this jazz. I love Wynton Marsalis. He's such a wonderful musician, and now head of the Lincoln Center, but he just lost his father to the coronavirus. We have so much in this land to be proud of, such a rich cultural environment, but we have a country that was founded as a result of terrible, terrible violence. Here's a poem from my book, Rivers, Wings, and Sky, The White Wing. The keeper of the white wing rode ill with pneumonia to save his people. Bearing a white flag, he sought peace, but others would fight. At Wounded Knee, the soldiers' guns killed for hours. That December day, 250 Lakotas and 25 soldiers died. After the slaughter, a blizzard blew from the north. As an elder shouted, "The wing, the wing!" The gravedigger threw the blood-stained white wing into the burial trench. A century later, white-winged birds ride the north winds, soaring over the curving river, glistening with sunlight. The checkered fields of green and brown, the riverbanks, with umbrella-like shade that once belonged to all. Even birds sharing seeds seem to know that Earth's abundance is the white wing of peace, falling to earth as flakes of snow. And then I have a new poem that I want to read to you, but it began a number of years ago in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, August 27th, 2004. The poem is entitled Standard Time for Poetry. The Orpheum's transformer blew, so the music and poetry moved. As standard time, the jazz band set up. The audience trooped in, standing room only for Quincy Troop. Dressed in black with hair braided down to his shoulders, the poet took his place in front of the band. My poems have holes sewn into them, he said, and only God knows where they go. He spoke of his father, of the thick branches of his family tree breaking down into African and Cherokee. Culture is the key, he said. Connection to the culture that surrounds you. He said his mother was a sweet smelling invisible bloom, a survivor of the Great Depression. And he read his poems to Miles Davis tunes. On the Corner, Kind of Blue. Quincy Troop, Jim Spears, Miles Davis, all together in that room. Poetry comes from speech, he said. The poet had come from a different place, but what he remembered brought back the mothers, fathers, grandparents who taught us to speak, who taught us to love the music of words. And that's what I love about poetry, the music of words, the sound of the poem. And that's why I love reading poetry, I think. And thank you for listening to these poems. I am so lucky to live in this place, despite all the sadness and horrors of the founding of it and the continued violence and discrimination. I think we're working, as Elizabeth said at the beginning of this reading, we've got hard work to do. But groups of people are working on it. They're demonstrating in the streets. They're meeting to try to figure out how we can become a more humane and just society in the United States and all over the world. People are really taking this to heart, and it's hard. It's hard process, but it's a wonderful process to think about with poets. So I'm glad I could be part of today and be with you in
Thank
doing
you,
this.
Norma. Christine,
Thank you.
since you're our fearless leader, do you want to sign us off?
Thanks everyone for watching this, and hopefully everyone will make some more time for poetry in their lives, either reading it or writing it and sharing it. So thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.